Hey, welcome back to Project Me, day 69. Today we're going to talk about two things. It won't be very long because I have a lot of sleep to catch up on and it's quite late and I'd like to go to bed. So we won't tarry. The first one is just a bit of gratitude for a friend, and the second one is on this sort of philosophical conundrum, if you will, that I've only recently sort of thought my way out of, and I thought I'd share my thinking because I'm sure other people have thought about it as well. Okay, on to the first. I've grown really close with a friend of mine quite recently, far closer than I ever really could have thought. And I mean that in the sense that sometimes we just sort of forget how to love. And I don't mean romantically, I mean just like pure love in all its shapes and forms, and platonically. And I'm really grateful to her for so many things, but most importantly because she's able to bring out the softness in me that I thought I'd lost. Um, it's almost like a fossil. It's something that I'm sure existed so long ago, once upon a time, but has been buried for so long that I'm not actually sure it even existed or it was real to begin with. But being around her is reminding me of that, and showing me that it did used to exist and it still does exist. And frankly, I'm just in absolute awe of her that she's able to bring it out because it's a part of me I thought I'd lost. Um, but also, what our friendship has reminded me of and highlighted is the importance of vulnerability in relationships, and connections that are deep and resilient. They're not surface level because they require depth and complexity. It's something that is best done through being vulnerable, I think at least. And this goes back to something we talked about in the last video where we spoke about loneliness. But here, between me and her, I'm noticing that I'm still really bad at vulnerability, but I'm trying to get better. It's hard, it's painful, it's slow, but I am trying. For example, I'm trying to answer her questions directly and without deflecting. It's not perfect, but it is progress. And I'm really happy that I get to hang out with her. On to the second thing, which again is a sort of philosophical conundrum that I've struggled with for far longer than I care to admit. It's based on the idea that to know something, you need to know its opposite. To know the light, you need to know the dark. To be good, you have to understand the nature of evil, and so on and so forth. It's getting at the idea that to fully understand or recognize something, you also have to fully understand or at least recognize its inverse. And you could apply that logic or that idea to many different things. For example, bravery. Bravery is not foolish determination, right? It's the courage to persevere despite the terror. And that's precisely it. It is to act despite your fear. You understand your own terror, and that is why you choose to rise up and act bravely. Or gentleness, for example. It doesn't come from the absence of violence, but from the abundance of it. Right? You don't call a man is, at least I wouldn't call a man I know is incapable of violence as gentle, because he wouldn't be capable of being gentle, right? It's because that man can be violent and chooses not to be that makes him gentle. If you understand the meaning that I'm trying to get at there. And again, I began thinking about this from a very young age, far younger than I think is healthy. And the reason I say that is because it developed into one of these really deep-rooted fears that in order to be what I want to be, I also have to embody or experience the opposite. So, and the reason this is such a bad thing, or was a bad thing for me, was because, for example, if I try to live a moral life, unless I understand immorality or evil, how can I be sure that my moral life is going in the right direction? Without properly understanding what makes my morals good, how can I guarantee that I do live a good moral life? The simple answer, or at least that I think is that until I understand the opposite, I actually can't guarantee my commitment to that morality. And I'm sure there are some thoughts, at least, that follow the lines of, morality, it's just good and bad, right? How hard is it to identify the good, right? How hard can it possibly be? And the answer is, well, it's not at all. It's not at all easy, right? That's sort of why philosophy as a field exists. It's why there's a whole debate around abortion, right? I mean, the protection of life, and the protection of freedom of choice, right? Neither is. I mean, some people say one is worth more than the other, and it's not a discussion I want to get into. But I'm just saying that they are both valid rights and valid sides of an argument. So morals themselves aren't black and white, right? But unless you understand why you hold those morals, they're not really morals, right? Morals are moral because of their evil, because of the immorality that they oppose themselves to. So it's only by understanding the immorality and the evil that morals actually take their form, right? That they form in the backdrop, or they form in the foreground of all that evil. It's like chaos and order, right? The Egyptians, they conceptualized the universe as the sea of chaos, and from that sea of chaos rises an obelisk of order, right? It's from that chaos, that background of chaos, that you can focus on order, or that the concept of order emerges. You can't understand one without the other. Without chaos, how could you possibly know what order is, and vice versa? So, I think I've said enough examples, but that idea has really, really terrified me, because I live my life with intention. I choose to be good, I choose to be kind, I choose to be thoughtful, and there might be times where I have not been, but thankfully they're not easy to recall. And I choose to live this way simply because I choose to, I want to. And I worry that until I understand the harm of evil, cruelty, and ignorance, I'm always at risk of succumbing to evil. And that's taken me a very long time to reconcile, because I realized that understanding the opposite doesn't necessarily mean that I have to commit the opposite. I just merely have to experience it in some way, like, for example, as a victim or a witness. So let's take an extreme example: cheating on a partner, for example. To understand why cheating is bad, I don't necessarily have to do the cheating, which is what a fallacy, right? It's what I originally thought, and it was a fallacy. I don't have to be the cheater. I just have to either be a friend of the victim or be the victim themselves, to understand the harm that it causes. And that is sort of how you can begin to understand the opposite, or at least recognize it, right? And that will begin to shape what you are striving to do. So in this case, be loyal. You understand the harm that cheating causes. Therefore, you understand the need and the reason to be loyal, right? So that's sort of how I've begun to change my thinking around it. And it seems like a very obvious way to think, right? But not so for me. Complete fallacy for me. And essentially, if we labor under this assumption, I choose to be good because I have seen bad. I choose to be kind because I have witnessed cruelty. And I choose to be thoughtful because I've observed ignorance. And yes, there will always be a depth to these ideas where you can always understand more. Like, for example, you may be kind now, or you may be thoughtful now, but until, for example, you go to a war zone and you see just how much people suffer, especially in those places, it'll sort of transform the level of kindness and thoughtfulness that you can sort of expect of yourself, right? Because you understand the opposites all that much more. You understand the cruelty and the evil much more because of that. So, but so long as you're aware of the effects of the opposite of the evil, then you can sort of shape the direction that you want to go in, at least a little bit more easier. Again, it comes into that background, foreground sort of tension that I mentioned earlier. But listen, we're going to leave it there. These thoughts have been part of my thinking for well over 10 years now. But it's, again, really only this year that I've sort of started to reconcile them with myself. It's been very tricky, lots of thinking, because it's something that I was really, really afraid of for the longest time. This idea that to be good, I'd have to stoop into the evil, which then sort of undermines the whole goodness of everything, right? So, even though I wanted to strive for good, if I had sort of dipped my toes in evil just to understand being good, I would have felt corrupt. I wouldn't have felt pure in my goodness. So it's something that really troubled me for a long time. But I'm glad that I've sort of found a way through these ideas and this brick wall, if you will. And here we are. So we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much. I hope any of that was, well, remotely insightful. I hope you all have an absolutely wonderful weekend. And you have just a great time. All the best, guys. Cheers.